The rise of the administrative athlete, applying sports psychology in the workplace. So what was the catalyst for this intervention? Why did I create this at companies that I've worked for? And why now do I have a consultancy firm that supports this intervention? Well, meet Chris. Chris hired me as his sports psychologist to help him deal with the stress and anxiety he was feeling through becoming an elite golfer. Please take note of how I help Chris through the evidence-based strategies detailed on the slide. I help Chris foster intrinsic motivation, evolve a process focus, engage in breathwork, journaling, use of imagery, goal setting, and we changed the way that Chris practiced. Now meet Brandon. Brandon was a professional golf management student and someone that I had the pleasure of employing at a previous company. Like Chris, Brandon was feeling stressed and anxious as he strove to progress his career. Please take note of the non-evidence-based but culturally accepted interventions I made with Brandon, increasing his bonus, increasing his pay, and increasing his responsibility. As time progressed at this organization, I noticed that Brandon did not seem any happier at work, even though he was taking big steps towards his career goals and being financially rewarded for them. So I picked the following 3 evidence-based interventions in an attempt to help my employees like Brandon and address the shortcomings that currently exist in traditional corporate strategies. I chose to work on fostering intrinsic motivation, enhancing a process focus, and reducing anxiety with breathing exercises. So what are these shortcomings that I speak of that exist in traditional corporate strategies? Well, outcome focus. Outcome-based metrics like revenue targets or retention figures often lead to stress as they are low control. These are fueled by current corporate culture. Extrinsic motivators. These are less resilient and less fulfilling than intrinsic motivators and can lead to employees going through the motions or even quitting. Extrinsic motivation is fueled by current corporate culture. The hedonic treadmill. Research suggests that external achievements might not have the lasting impact on our overall well-being that maybe we think. Again, these are fueled by current corporate culture. So my conclusion, the business world is encouraging stress. It's not managing it. Evidence-based research highlights that outcome targets and external motivators are not centered around well-being, nor are they centered around high performance. My evidence-based intervention that I activated at companies that I've worked at, and now through my consultancy firm, The Administrative Athlete, aims to address this. So how did I practically apply this at previous companies? And what are the kind of things that I may look at doing as a consultant for other companies? Well, previously, I've revamped the way that I've done individual meetings. So the traditional performance review was paused, and I began to help employees develop their own personal mission, their own personal vision, and their own personal value statements that educate them on intrinsic motivation and help foster intrinsic motivation in the workplace. I've shifted team meeting focuses. I've transitioned team meetings from discussing about non-controllable outcome-based targets, such as revenue targets or customer retention targets, to more controllable process-orientated goals. This change supports reducing outcome stress that employees often feel. I took a scientific approach to stress relief. I've implemented mandatory trainings in nasal breathwork with ongoing optional trainings available at no cost to employees once they complete the 8-week mandatory course. And I've done this very efficiently. I've allocated existing company time for these activities by shifting 90% of routine business communications to email, thus freeing up time to support these initiatives without overburdening the staff. Prior to making these interventions at companies I've worked for or as a consultant, we have to understand if this problem exists. So what I've previously done, I've interviewed staff and looked for common trends. I've also designed a questionnaire that can confirm if these issues exist. And then post-intervention, I re-interview staff, I resend out questionnaires, and we can measure the success that this has on your company culture, on the well-being of your employee, and what impacts does it have on outcome metrics like revenue or customer retention. So in conclusion, I advocate for sports psychology in the workplace. I've done it as a business director. I now do it as a consultant because evidence-based sports psychology improves employee well-being and increases higher performance. It does this through fostering intrinsic motivation, process focus, and the ability to deal with stress. Once these interventions are proven successful at a company, I recommend the following. I recommend that job specifications and job postings be rewritten. I recommend changes to the interview process as questions that assess candidates' alignment to these kind of interventions are now required. Onboarding processes need to be changed so they establish these habits early on in employment. Manuals and company messaging will always need updating, so this kind of intervention is indoctrinated into the culture. And finally, I encourage leadership to move away from data-driven approaches and to embody the cultural shifts that this kind of intervention calls for, a more humanized approach in the workplace. Obviously, this can bring anticipated challenges. Business leaders can have financial concerns. Often companies will be more focused on paying back investors than investing in employees' well-being. There can be resistance from current employees. Not all employees want this type of culture from a workplace. And there can also be a traditional corporate resistance because many successful businessmen and women have never done it this way, and they feel more comfortable with traditional corporate culture living on. But by anticipating these challenges and preparing to address them with well-considered, well-designed strategies, I can effectively advocate for treating employees as administrative athletes, enhancing their happiness in the workplace, and enhancing their performance.